You are like a puppy. And this is why it's so hard to accept the truth. And you want to know something crazy? So right before I came up here to talk to you about habits, honest to goodness, you know what I was doing? I was standing in my kitchen with my family of 5, and we were in the middle of a dog training session. I'm not making this up. We have a 3-year-old Australian Shepherd named Yolo and a 5-month-old puppy named Homie. And Homie needs new habits. Homie is not going to go from being a puppy to a beautifully trained dog without us training him. You are the same way as Homie. Right now, there are areas of your life where you're doing whatever the hell you want to do, just like my puppy is. And you and I are going to go back to obedience school, back to the basics. That's what habits are about. And as I was sitting there watching this training session with our 2 dogs, I'm thinking, holy smokes, it really is this simple. So I had this epiphany, and I just turned to Caroline Edgar from Grateful Dogs, and I said, would you be willing to come upstairs with me? Because I'm about to do something about habits, and you training these dogs is making me realize everything I was about to say to the humans is the exact same thing that you do to the dogs. And so she came up here. So here I am talking with Caroline. So I am so blown away right now that I kidnapped Caroline from our family dog training session. And she's like, wait, what? You're going to put me on the podcast? You could have given me some warning, Mel. I'm just so blown away by how training dogs, or at least how you train new behaviors in dogs, is the exact same steps, sequence, and science in how human beings learn new habits and behaviors.
Right. I often have people say, can I train my husband this way? And I'm like, yeah, you actually can.
With a clicker?
Right? Positive reinforcement. Just reinforce what you like.
There it is right there. Reinforce what you like. Learning new habits is dead simple. And let's just stay on this puppy analogy for a minute before we jump into all the big science, right? How do you make it a habit for a puppy to sit? I mean, it doesn't just automatically sit. You have to train the puppy to do a new pattern. So let's stop and think about this, because it's the exact same way you train yourself to do any new habit. First of all, you have to identify the thing that you want to do. And for me, with our puppy Homie, when I say the word sit, I want him to put his butt on the ground. The second thing that you need to do is identify a treat. What's your milk bone? Because that dog is not going to sit on the ground unless I reward him for doing what I want him to do. And finally, you got to think about what is the command or the physical thing that you're going to do that will trigger this positive new behavior pattern. That's it. That's how you teach a dog to sit. You come up with the command, which is basically a trigger or a cue that is signaling, okay, time to put your butt on the ground. That's the behavior pattern. And then you give them a milk bone, a reward. And the more that you repeat this and the more you reward the dog for doing what you want it to do, guess what? The faster it becomes a habit. I am really serious about this. Because remember, I said there are 2 things that are getting in the way of you taking this very well-documented research that you need to cue the new behavior, you need to do the new behavior, then you need to reward the new behavior. And the thing that's getting in your way of just doing this is that you got a lot of emotions and opinions about the things you need to do. And so you think it's complicated to work on your business, and so you don't do it. Or you're like, I don't feel like going to the gym. It's not that complicated. It's actually simple. It's like training a puppy. Thank God our puppy Homie can't talk, because I'm sure if he could, he'd be like you and I are, but I don't feel like sitting down right now, but I don't want to. No, let's make this as simple as training a puppy. And I'm doing this not because this is kind of funny, ha ha ha. I'm doing this because this is actually what the research says. The research is as plain as day. You need 3 things. You need to cue the new behavior, you need the behavior pattern that you want to repeat, and you need to reward the behavior. That's it. That's what Dr. Wendy Wood says, and this is what every book on the planet is teaching you, and this is what the science says. There is a 3-step process, and this 3-step process is critical. And so on the episode today, we are going to go step by step by step through all 3 steps until you get this. You get this in your being, because these 3 steps are how you go from a life of hitting the snooze alarm 4 times to a life where you have a rock solid morning routine. You have to think about the new behavior, how you're going to trigger that, and what the reward is going to be. That's it. That's it. So let's start with part 1. That is the cue. You'll also hear this called the trigger. You'll hear this called the signal, the command, whatever you want to call it is fine with me. This is just the thing that is signaling that it is time to do the new behavior. And I'm going to stick with the example of the puppy because I really want you to get that this is all there is to habits. We can layer on all the emotion and all the opinions about it, but it boils down to these 3 things. So part 1, if I want to teach the puppy this new behavior of learning how to sit, the cue is very simple. You say the word sit. Another thing that I could do is I could raise my hand in the air silently. Simple, right? That's how you teach a dog to sit. You got to cue the behavior. Otherwise, it doesn't know that it wants me to do it. Simple. Same with you. You got to trigger any new habit. Part number 2, the new behavior. So the new behavior is literally, I want our dog to make it a habit to put his rear end on the floor when I either raise my fist or I say sit. That's it. And so I can do that one of 2 ways. I can either take a treat and lift it up towards its nose in the sky, and then as he lifts his nose up, his rear end will naturally sit down. Or as I say the word sit, I can gently help him put his rear end on the floor. There's part 2, the behavior pattern. Part 3, and this is essential because this is what makes the behavior automatic. This is the part that locks it into your brain and encodes it. You have to treat the behavior immediately. Immediately. Now, for a dog, what I learned downstairs in the kitchen this morning is that you have to do it within seconds. Literally within seconds. With you and me, we're going to dig into this more deeply when we really unpack rewards, is you and I, based on the research, we have to reward ourselves within 2 minutes of finishing the new behavior. And the treat really, really matters because what's happening when you do this is you're associating in the brain the cue or the word sit with a milk bone. That's what's happening. This is going to become a habit in my dog to sit when he hears the word sit, not because he hears the word sit, but because the second he hears it, he starts thinking about the reward. That's why this works. That's how this encodes in the brain. The reward is critical. And here's what we do as human beings. We get so emotional about this stuff that we focus on the thing we're supposed to do. Why can't I just journal? Why can't I stop eating bread? Why is it that I always put myself last? Why can't I just be consistent with this thing? And you're missing the 2 most important parts. It's not about the journaling, everybody. It's about getting smart about this 3-part system. How you're going to trigger the positive behavior of journaling every single morning. And what reward are you going to give yourself within 2 minutes of finishing it? What's your milk bone? This is why habits matter. Because you and I are busy setting goals and wanting to change behavior, but we're only focusing on behavior and we're not thinking about the science. See, you're not dumb, you're not stupid, you're not any less capable. You just need to simplify this and really focus on how you cue new behavior in yourself. And more importantly, how are you going to reward this? I promised you that I am going to make this habit research as simple and as effortless as a cup of coffee so that you don't think about it, so that you just sit down and you journal. Because guess what? You're the kind of person that does that because it's a habit. Now what I want to do is drill down even more on the cue, how you're going to trigger behavior, and the reward. And let's focus on what this means for human beings, okay? And so let's start with the cue, or what a lot of researchers call the trigger for new behavior. Anytime you hear somebody talk about a trigger, whether it's habit research or trauma or whatever, a trigger is something that signals to your brain that it's time for you to engage in this pattern of behavior. And honestly, there's already a lot of behavior in your life that is being triggered and you don't even realize it. If you're the kind of person, for example, that makes a cup of coffee every morning without even thinking about it, the morning is triggering a cup of coffee. The morning is triggering this habit of making a cup of coffee. If you're like I used to be, it's 6 o'clock, time to have a glass of wine. 6 o'clock is triggering a cup of coffee. And when you think about your own behavior change, there are 6 types of triggers that are right now triggering behavior in you and that you can think about using proactively when you identify the new habits that you want to create. So the first trigger is sound. Now, obviously, I just talked about this with YOLO and Homie, but the word sit, boom, that can trigger the action of sitting on the ground. A whistle can trigger the action of a dog coming to you. But it's also true for you. You know that sound that you hear when you turn on Netflix? Dun, 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 right? And it makes you go like, ooh, okay, and you settle in. That's a sound trigger. They're literally creating an association with that sound with a positive feeling of sitting on that couch for a couple hours and zoning out. You're ready for TV. Time of day. I've already talked about this. Time of day is a humongous trigger. So the morning triggers you to do a certain number of things. The evening triggers you to do things like have a glass of wine or start making dinner. A third trigger for behavior is location. Location, location, location. You know, it's very easy to stick to your habits when you're in your own home because your home, where you live, it triggers a certain routine. When you go visit somebody, when you go to your parents' house, when you're off on vacation, isn't it interesting that within 3 or 4 days, you just feel off? Your routine is off. You're itching to get back home. Well, the reason why is because that location that you're now in is different than the location that triggers your old routine. You don't feel like exercising because you're at your mother's house. And another thing is like, you know, sometimes you can be at your house and it's almost like it's like sucks you in and you don't feel motivated to work on your book or to do whatever, or to jump on an online class. But boy, you feel different when you walk into a different location, don't you? Like a gym. Another trigger is an emotional state. A lot of you are writing to me about how you have goals of becoming a healthier eater this year. And you're probably aware that your emotions of sadness or boredom or feeling tired, that emotion is triggering you to make you reach for something. You know, when I'm frustrated, for example, that emotion, it triggers a habit I don't like, which is snapping at my kids. And I also learned today in the dog training class, check this out. This is true for dogs too. There's a difference between the skills you're learning and the emotional state you're trying to master. And believe it or not, your pets have emotional states that interfere with their ability to access the skills that they're learning. So just like you get emotional and the wheels go off, the same thing happens with your pets. That's why even though I'm trying to train my dog YOLO to be quiet when people arrive, that's a new habit we're working on. When he gets like really overwhelmed, he just starts barking. And so your emotions are huge triggers. Right now, they're huge triggers probably for bad habits, but we can start to use that trigger of emotion to develop new habits. And finally, the fifth one is other people that you're around. I know that you know that your circle matters, but I want you to just think about how much this matters. Let's say you are somebody that wants to exercise every single day. That's a huge thing for people, right? Or I even got a better one. Let's say that you're somebody who really wants to make it a habit to be more organized this year. Tell me, does a person who is living with roommates who are complete and utter slobs, we're talking days of dishes in the sink, coats strewn all over the main area of the apartment. Their stuff is everywhere. The bathroom's disgusting. Now think about a person that lives with roommates who are OCD clean. Who do you think is going to have an easier time making a habit of staying organized. That's right, the person that's surrounded by people who support that change. And the final trigger are things in your environment. So, for example, I love Post-it notes because Post-it notes can be a trigger for a positive habit. And I can give you an example. Mr. Noodle, our cat, when he gets upset or angry or gets locked out of his room, he likes to go into this bathroom upstairs and pee in the corner. It's disgusting, I know. But he's mad at me. So he has this bad habit of doing this and acting out. When the door is closed, he can't do it. Nobody's going to remember to close the door. So I put a little trigger in the environment, a Post-it note that says, keep the door closed, because I'm trying to signal a new habit in everybody around here in closing the door. Now, I love triggers and I love focusing on triggers because triggers and thinking about how do I cue this behavior? How do I make it easier for myself? How do I make the thing that I'm supposed to do obvious, like that Post-it note that says close the door? When you focus on triggers, you can now hack habits. And this is such an enormous topic with so many tools and takeaways that we're going to dedicate the next episode in this series to the science of hacking habits and using triggers to make habits easier and obvious, okay? And there's a lot of this in that free worksheet, melrobbins.com/habits, that will help you figure out triggers, both positive and negative. But the bottom line is no trigger, no habit. No cue, no habit. And by the way, triggers are why bad habits are so hard to break. And here's why. Let's say that, like me, maybe you're participating in a month of not drinking, okay? We can't get rid of 6 p.m. at night. If you have a habit of pouring a glass of wine every night at 6 p.m., 6 p.m. ain't going away. And so you need to know that when 6 p.m. rolls around, when that sun goes down, when that clock strikes 6, guess what's going to happen? You are going to be triggered to repeat your old habit. Because what does a habit have? It has a trigger, it has a behavior, drink that glass of wine, and then it has a reward. Ah, that feels good. You can't get rid of 6 p.m., which is why when it comes to replacing behavior, you have to anticipate the trigger and replace the behavior. Here's another one. When somebody starts cooking dinner, don't you feel hungry? Or when somebody starts making a snack in the kitchen, don't you feel like you want a snack? Me too. We cannot take away the things that trigger our current habits. You're never going to get over the fact that an alarm's going to go off in the morning. New habits allow you to change your response to existing triggers. That's where this gets exciting. And the other thing that's exciting about triggers and why we're going to dedicate the entire next episode around it is because when you get proactive about creating triggers, Post-it notes, visual cues, surrounding yourself with the right people, now you're using triggers to your advantage. I got a trigger. I'm about to tell you, we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. I bet there's something you do automatically. Don't skip the ads. Let's have a new behavior. They're supporting the show because we're going to be right back. And when we return, I got a great reward for you. We're going to jump deep into that third part of all behavior change, and that is the reward and how you use it and what researchers say about it so that you lock in these new habits. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here with me. We just talked about the 3 parts of a habit, which are the cue or trigger, the behavior you need to repeat, and the reward. And as promised, now we're going to go deep into this third essential part, and that is the reward. You have to have a reward. The research is so clear on this, and this goes not only for human beings, but also for puppies. Here's what our trainer from Grateful Heart had to say about the importance of a reward. So, Caroline, is it possible to teach a dog a new behavior without a reward?
No. There's got to be a reward of some kind. So it doesn't need to be food. It could be personal play. It could be It can even be the environment. It could even be something as much as if they check in with me, you can say, free, you're off leash, run through the field, have fun, Environmental rewards, go sniff. Often I use that with my dogs. Like they come in and they check in with me and I'm like, yeah, go get it.
This is essential. Let's just take the puppy. When you repeat the command, right? So you've got this trigger, down, which means lie down. And your dog does it, and then you hand them a milk bone, you are fusing the command, the trigger, down with the reward. And that's how the behavior becomes automatic. That's it. Now look, for you, I don't want you eating a milk bone. That's not the reward. And for some habits, it's easier to lock them in place because there's an innate reward. So for example, brushing your teeth. That's a very easy habit to get into. Why? Because the reward is that your mouth doesn't feel like it's got shag carpeting on it anymore. Or using dryer sheets. Why is that easy to kind of remember to do? Well, because it's a really nice reward when you pull things out of the dryer and you don't get an electric shock. Or when you buy things. This is why some bad habits are very easy to learn. When you buy something, the reward is both the thrill of the purchase, and if you bought it online, you get a second reward because the new thing arrives at your door. This also explains why coffee, alcohol, things that we kind of get addicted to, they're pretty potent habits, aren't they? Because the reward is the second that you sip it, you feel good. The reward is innate. But for other habits, you have to add an external reward, okay? Because the reward is what gives you a bit of dopamine. When my puppy gets the milk bone, or it gets a pat on the head, or it gets a little tug of war play, it gets a reward of dopamine. That motivation and drive chemical is what locks in the behavior as automatic. It creates what researchers call a habit loop. So when you text a friend a photo after you finish something and they text you back, boom, dopamine. That's why you make it a habit to text your friends, because it feels good when they text back. When you have a little piece of chocolate, I have one every day right around 2 o'clock. It's a little bit of a habit. I feel the 2 o'clock strike. Boom. Where's my chocolate? Boom. The dopamine hits. That's my reward. It's a habit. When you watch a funny video, why do we waste so much time watching funny memes and TikToks? Because every time that you laugh, dopamine, you get a reward. That's why you keep strolling, by the way, because you might just get another reward. You keep seeking out the behavior. This is why the reward is so important. And most of us are just kind of hoping we feel better. You need to hack behavior change by thinking about what is your milk bone going to be? And let me use a very common habit that people want to lock into place to explain this: exercising more. So for some of you, maybe this is you, simply the thrill of the post-workout endorphin, it's enough of a reward. Not for me. I'm going to tell you a story about me trying to create a habit of exercising 5 days a week and why the reward was the only reason why it happened. Okay. So this was in 2019. I was a brand new TV talk show host, and I was living during the week in a hotel in New York City as we were taping this show. And it was really important to me, because this job was super stressful, that I figured out how to get exercise in every single day. Now, here's the rub. The job of being a TV host required me to be at the CBS Broadcast Center by 7 o'clock in the morning. And most nights I worked until at least 7 o'clock at night. So I knew that I was not going to have the energy to exercise at night. And I also knew that if I was going to actually make it to that studio by 7 o'clock every morning, ready to go, ready to work, ready to tape a TV show, I had to be exercising by 5:30 in the morning. I don't know about you, but I am not the kind of person that loves to just spring right out of bed. I am not like my husband. I do not roll right out of bed. And so the thought of getting out of bed and being in my exercise tights and standing in an exercise class at 5:30 in the morning, this is a whole new Mel Robbins. And I also know myself well enough to know that there was no way in hell I was going to get myself down to a gym in the hotel and motivate myself at that hour, that I actually needed a class where somebody was going to be yelling at me if I planned on moving and exercising. And so that means that I not only needed to be up at 5:30 in that class, I had to be up at like 5 o'clock in the morning in order to get dressed, leave the hotel, get to a class that was actually happening somewhere in New York City at 5:30 in the morning. And so I knew that if I was going to do that, there were certain triggers that I needed to do. Okay, so I have a problem. I want to exercise. I want to be the kind of person that exercises every day. So how do I make it a habit to do this when I am not that person? I am not the person that wants to get out of bed. My habits say I sleep in. My habits say I'm too tired. My habits say that's way too early. How do I become that person? Well, how you become that person is you use the 3 steps we've been talking about. You need a trigger and you need the reward. The behavior part, that's easy to identify. Get your ass to the gym. What is the trigger? Well, I came up with 2. Trigger number 1 was I would sign up for a class the night before. I would sign up because I was committed to doing this for my mental health and so that I would perform at the highest level in this new job. So that's number 1. I'd sign up ahead of time because then I'd felt a sense of obligation. The second thing that I would do is I would lay out my clothes on the floor, just like, your mom might have done when you were a little kid. I would lay out the clothes the night before so that the second I woke up and I thought, ugh, I would see those clothes, and those clothes were a trigger to get out of bed. Because for me, I'm not the kind of person like my husband. When that alarm goes off at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm not rolling out of bed and going, I know when I'm done with this, I'm going to feel better, so I'm going to go. No, I complicate things. I'm overwhelmed. I'm dramatic. I don't feel like it. But as I lean over to turn off the alarm alone in my hotel room at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I don't feel like exercising and it's pitch black, there, like a giant middle finger on the floor from the future Mel Robbins, are my exercise clothes laying on the floor. That, my friend, is a trigger. Another cue is that since I have registered for the class, there is a text in my phone from the class reminding me that I registered. Another giant middle finger from the future Mel Robbins. That's the trigger. That's cueing the behavior. Get your ass out of bed, pull those tights on, get your coat on, get your sneakers on, and walk those 10 blocks to that exercise class, woman. Because you are the kind of person that exercises in the morning, even though you don't feel like it. Now, this is where the reward comes in. This is where things get really interesting, and this is where the neuroscience kicks in. So, I've explained a quick trigger, the clothes on the floor and registering the night before. The reward is essential. So, the very first morning that I went to this exercise class, I got there very proud of myself, but knowing I'd be proud of myself, not enough of an award for Mel Robbins, okay? After the exercise class, so now it's 6:30 in the morning, I am walking back to the hotel, and there is a coffee shop. And I walk in, and it's not just any coffee shop. It's one of those like New York City coffee shops, that's like, it looks like an IKEA store. It's very sterile, and it's got basically all white walls and a giant espresso machine that looks like an aircraft carrier. And the person that's making the coffee, clearly from Brooklyn because he has a beard and he's got one of those aprons on that have the leather straps to it. And you just know this is going to be the best damn cup of coffee you've ever had. And then right next to it, oh my God, there was a pile of breakfast burritos. They were about the size of, I'm trying to think about what size this would be. A little bit bigger than a man's wallet. And they were wrapped in foil, and they had been made by somebody who probably doesn't even have a commercial kitchen license because they were made by a woman that drops them off, and they just looked like homemade amazingness, the kind of thing that comes from somebody that they make them with love. They're not making 50,000 burritos, they're making 50, and they're dropping them off right there. So I bought this burrito, and I leave this coffee shop, and I unfold the burrito, and it's dripping down my hand, and I go and I take a bite, and it is one of those burritos that is like that moist, gummy feeling on the flour tortilla because it's been steamed, and it just, the cheese is melted with the chorizo. I can't even say the sausage and the cheese. It was magic in my mouth. Just absolutely fantastic. Okay, that was my reward. I got a cup of coffee and a burrito. Enough with the burrito, Mel. No, actually, the burrito matters. The burrito matters more than anything. Because let me tell you what happened the very next morning. The very next morning, the alarm rings. There are my tights on the floor like a middle finger, and there is the text. Triggers, get out of bed. But you know what my mind immediately thought of? The burrito. The burrito was my milk bone. The burrito fused this new habit in my brain. The reward is everything. I'm telling you, the reward is everything. It's the milk bone of habits. Because what happens in the science with a habit loop is that when you can find a reward that really makes you feel good, that you feel a sense of accomplishment, the way your brain works is that the habit loop forms by associating the trigger, which is the tights on the floor, with the reward. You don't even think about the exercise. Just like my dog doesn't even think about sitting, doesn't even think about running to me when I yell his name and I say, come. He's thinking about the milk bone. And so this is the science that makes it easy. I told you I was going to make this so simple that a dog would understand. And I also told you that I was going to make this so easy that you can apply it immediately, that you would be able to figure out how to create behavior change in your life that is as effortless as making a cup of coffee every single morning. And I'm going to tell you something. It took me about 4 to 5 mornings before that alarm went off, and I didn't look at those tights like it was a middle finger saying, you're going to have to exercise, Mel. It took me 4 or 5 mornings before I looked at those tights and I was like, oh yeah, it's burrito time, bitches. Let's go. Oh, I got to stop by this stupid exercise class first. But this is such powerful science. And what's also interesting about the neuroscience here is that, you know what I was thinking about as I was exercising? I wasn't thinking about the fact that my butt cheeks were shaking or that I hated being there or that I was sweating in inappropriate places and my tights were too light of a color. No, I was thinking about that coffee shop that looked like a Kia, that espresso machine that was the size of a New York City bus, and the gooey, chewy, amazing burrito that I was going to have when I was done exercising. That's what I was thinking about. So whatever new habit you have, whether you just want to drink more water with your meals, or you want to spend more time working on your goals, or you want to feel more organized, you have to take time to think about not only the trigger, but what is a reward that really matters to you. And this is so important because positive reinforcement is what we're talking about. And I'm willing to bet any area of your life where you're trying to make a behavior change stick, you have no reward. Or worse, you're punishing yourself. You're saying, I'm not doing enough. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just sit down and write? Why can't I get my bills paid? Why can't I do this? That's negative reinforcement. And just like with a puppy, this is going to backfire on you. So I want to bring Caroline from Grateful Dogs back to the conversation because I asked her about this. Like, what happens if you don't give a puppy a milk bone? What happens if you do what I often see people doing, whereas they like call a dog to them and then, beat it or yell at it or, scream at it? What happens when you don't do positive reinforcement? Check this out. Can you describe what happens to a dog if they're getting negative reinforcement? They're getting hit, they're getting yelled at, they're getting put in a cage, they're getting just a yank on the leash.
Mm-hmm. So they're getting suppressed. Mm. So I always think of it as, the kids in school where they're like, oh, I know. And then they are either made fun of or they get the wrong answer. They're made to feel badly. Mm. They're no longer offering that, right? Very quickly, we teach kids to just kind of suck it up. And the same thing happens with animals. So animals that have been suppressed in some way, whether, positive punishment or too much management, depending on the animal, right? Because some animals are very resilient and can find other ways of expressing themselves, but often you get what's called learned helplessness, where they just go through not knowing what to do, so they stop doing everything altogether. So, and often you'll also get, it'll morph into something else. So if the dog goes charging to the door and we yell at them, often what you'll get, you're pairing, a negative consequence with someone walking through the door. So suddenly that person coming through the door makes everything unsafe. You're normally a pretty stable person, but when someone comes through the door, you start yelling or, grabbing the dog by the scruff, then we've created an association with that person walking through the door and negative consequences. So you'll actually get more aggression or more fear-based behaviors. And some dogs will just shut down and they're just sort of deadpan. I actually think I don't know what to do, so I won't do anything.
I think you just explained human behavior. No, I'm serious.
Closely related.
Yeah, because we often are trying hard to change. And at the end of trying hard, we beat ourselves up internally because it wasn't enough or we didn't do it right or, blah, bitty, blah, bitty, blah, which that idea of suppressing the desire to learn or the desire to try, that learned helplessness that we create in ourselves because of the way we talk to ourselves as we're doing our best. Whereas the solution's very obvious. It's rewarding the incremental positive attempts to try, which only makes you want to try more. And I know I hammer this point about you need to be kinder to yourself, but I think that it's also part of habit formation. You're never going to make it a habit to exercise if you're constantly trashing yourself for not doing it or for not doing it enough. That's not a positive reward. Why would you want to journal if at the end of it you're like, well, that was hard? You wouldn't. That's not how your brain works. That's not how training an animal works. That's not how human psychology or neuroscience works. You have to have a positive reward. And so this brings me back to you and what you're thinking about changing and how you're going to apply this simple research to making this new behavior pattern a habit, to have it go from something you're practicing and doing to evidence that you're becoming a person who runs. You're becoming a person who's organized. You're becoming a person who is a writer. You're not just journaling every day. You're a person that's very mindful and that has discipline. And I know you're now thinking, okay, Mel, I think I got it. I got the trigger and the cue. I can't wait for the next episode to go deeper in that. I got the behavior pattern and I got the fact that I got to focus on a reward. How long is this going to take before it's as easy as making a cup of coffee? So we have all been told that it takes 21 days to form a new habit, and it is complete horseshit. Okay. It's not true. And there's an important reason why. You have to understand that habit formation is deeply personal. And it has nothing to do with you. Habit formation has way more to do with the context and surroundings and the resistance that you have to the behavior that you're trying to implement. You and I are not robots. We are human beings. And so, number one, when you miss a day, if you beat yourself up or you get impatient and you start to bail and you feel all this resistance, it's going to take a lot longer. If you've been exercising and schlepping to the gym for 21 days and you're going, why do I still hate this? Why have I been drinking the water for 34 days and I still hate this? This isn't working, Mel. This is... I want to tell you something. There was a study done in the European Journal of Social Psychology, and the study is entitled, How Are Habits Formed? The lead researcher is a professor by the name of Philippa Lally from the University College of London, and her research shows that it takes between 18 and 254 days to form a habit. And when I say form a habit, that means you do it without resistance. You do it without bitching. You do it without really thinking about it. That's how long it took people in this study to form a habit, which means they removed the resistance to it, and now it just became part of who they do, part of who they are. They take a walk every night after dinner. They always have tea in the morning. They get out of bed when the alarm rings. They take their inbox to 0 every day. That's how long it took. And I want to just give you one other example because context matters. Context matters. If you wanted to get your finances in order, who is going to have an easier time making it a habit to get their finances in order? Someone that is surrounded by people that spend everything that they earn and live beyond their means and go out every night, or someone who has friends that are putting money away, that cook in, that pay their bills, that are interested in the stock market and are learning about it. When you are in an environment that is supporting the change, there's less resistance. When you have a great reward for why you're doing something, there's less resistance. When you are highly motivated to make this change and you're surrounded by supportive people, there's less resistance. When you are having a fun time doing this change, like a great reward, by the way, for exercising is do it with a friend. Because when you wake up in the morning, you won't think about the walk you're taking. You're going to think about the moment you see your friend. When you make it easier, when you make it more fun, when you think about the rewards, when it has deep meaning for you, when you surround yourself or put yourself in an environment where it's supporting the change, you'll be on the 18-day end instead of the 254-day end. That's why there's such a huge variation. And that's really good news because it means that you have the ability to use what you just learned to focus on how am I going to trigger this behavior and make it easier? What is the behavior change that I really want to make because it makes me see myself differently? I want to be a runner. I want to be an organized person. I want to be a happier person. I want to be a musician. I want to be an entrepreneur. All of these things that you want to change, you absolutely have the ability to do it. But that behavior change is going to be dependent on you. It's dependent upon why you want to do it, how you're going to trigger yourself, what environment you're going to put yourself in, and how you're going to reward yourself every single time that you engage in the behavior. The second I stop treating my dog for sitting, you know what's going to happen? He's going to stop listening. That's what's going to happen. And I don't think that makes him a bad dog. You can pick up behavior fast. You absolutely can. Like if we go back to Sarah's question, behavior change and drastic change can happen very quickly because the change in how you see yourself can happen quickly. The resistance to doing it, to achieving the goal, that's going to take some time. And here's one other thing that Dr. Lally discovered that I think is really good news. This is amazing. Missing a day, based on the research, does not materially affect the habit formation process, period. Missing a day does not materially affect the habit formation process. So let's just say that you are trying to make it a habit to get outside and to look at bright light first thing in the morning for 10 minutes, okay? Let's say you miss 3 days. And you're like, that's it. I can't do anything. I always bail on everything I try. I'm a failure. Blah, blah, blah. Guess what? Get that stupid notion in your head that you got to do it for 21 days straight. You got to be an Ironman. You got to be a robot. You got to be a Navy SEAL. It's complete bullshit. The 15 days that you've already put in, guess what? It's already started plowing new neural pathways in your mind. You're already 15 days on the path to behavior change. You didn't lose progress. You're not back at zero. You have not impacted the habit formation process. So if you're somebody who has spent a lifetime beating yourself up, starting to change, ending the change, starting the change, ending the change, starting the change, beating yourself up, you're like that kid who doesn't want to raise their hand in class anymore. Or you're like that dog that constantly got screamed at when it did something wrong. You've made it a habit of giving up. Yes, there is a way to unlock sudden change, and it's called habits. And that's what we're all going to talk about today. If you're somebody who's struggling to change, like maybe you're trying to become a better student, or you want to be better with your money, or more organized, or you'd love a rock solid morning routine, you're going to love this episode and everything you're about to learn, because habits are the evidence that you see that you're becoming a different person.